Good evening, Jim. How are you?
Good evening, Ryan.
can hear you. Call this meeting in order. City Rhinelander Common Council meeting. Today is Monday, June 14th, 2021 at 6 p.m. It's actually 6:01 p.m. As my lawyers point out, I'm late. That being the case, we are in the Chamber Hall. The meeting agenda has been posted. The meeting has been notified. There's a whole lot of business to cover, so call order.
Christopher Fredrickson.
Here.
Thomas Barnett.
Here.
Andrew Larson. Carrie Michalowski.
Here.
Thomas Kelly.
Here.
Gerald Anderson.
Here.
David Holt.
Here.
Eileen Daniel.
Here.
Ryan Rossing.
Here. We have quorum for business. Please stand. Public comments, Mayor. There was nobody that signed up in the gallery. I'll let you raise your hand one last time. And no. Do the alderpersons have anybody? All right. Everybody must agree with us. Presentations. An initial presentation by MSA Professional Service for the Housing Needs Assessment.
Yeah, Phil, if you want to come to the podium, and then at the base of the mic, there's a button, and we've got Becky joining us via Zoom as well.
Okay. I'm going to let Becky do most of the talking. I'm the smiling face from Rhinelander, so I'll let Becky take away with it.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So my name is Becky Binns. I'm a planner with MSA Professional Services, and I'll be managing the housing study for the city of Rhinelander. So I just wanted to go through a little bit of scope timeline with you guys tonight, show you guys a few data that I've mined so far, and then talk with you a little bit about what you're hoping to get out of the study and what some of the concerns you guys are. So can I share my screen? I just had a few slides I wanted to throw up there.
Zach's heading back to the computer that'll share your screen.
Okay. So while we're bringing that up, just a reminder about the goal of the housing study, because it's probably been a while since you guys have thought about it. With the CDBG funding application, that was a bit of a process, but well worth it. The city got some nice funding for it. So the overarching goal is we're going to assess the local housing market to meet the needs of current and potential residents. So at the end of the study, you'll have a better understanding of what unmet housing demand is by income and tenancy, so owner or renter occupancy in the city, and how the current market demand might change over the next 5 to 10 years. And then arguably one of the most important parts of the study, what strategies are you going to use to actually get that housing built? So those are going to be based on things other communities that are facing similar issues have tried and have worked. So I think that's going to be particularly useful. All right, let me. So I like to think of the housing study as kind of a puzzle, and we have a few different pieces going on. So the three main activities that we're going to be doing as part of the housing study are data collection, stakeholder input, and then we'll have that bundled up into a final report. And the data that we're going to be looking at in the housing study is primarily housing supply and housing demand. And then we're going to figure out, okay, where is the imbalance and what do we do to meet that imbalance? As far as housing supply, we're going to be looking at the different types of units and the characteristics of those units in the city and looking at different price points of those units. And then as far as housing demand, we look at the makeup of households and how the makeup of those households might influence demand. And perhaps most important, what the incomes of those households are, because that's going to tell us what they can actually afford. So as far as schedule, it's going to be kind of a quick schedule. We want to get this report done for the city so you can start using it so developers can have a better understanding of what the type of development the city wants to see and perhaps use that to help apply for some low-income housing tax credits either in this round or next year. So this is going to be a 14-week process. This week correlates with week 1 of the housing study. Week 14 is slated to be September 13th, where I'll be in person to do a final presentation of the study. At the end of this month and beginning of July, we're going to be doing some interviews with what we call housing experts. So these are people who should have a pretty good understanding of the housing market and how it's functioning in the city. So this is going to include landlords, realtors, developers, city staff, elected officials. So some of you guys might get tapped for some of those interviews, nonprofit groups, and then major employers to talk about what incomes they're potentially hiring and what they've heard that people are looking for as far as housing and they're not finding in the city. And then particular with developers, we understand that the city wants to communicate to developers that the city is very serious about addressing housing issues and really want to know what it's going to take to get developers to invest and build in Rhinelander. So that's going to be kind of something extra we're going to try and get out of those interviews and really emphasize to those developers. And then we're also going to have 2 public workshops that are slated to occur on the same day. We're working out finalizing logistics, but tentatively those are scheduled for Tuesday, July 13th. So we'll have one in the early afternoon and then one in the early evening. And then the next touch that I would have with you guys is at your council meeting on August 9th to present the preliminary findings and then the stakeholder feedback, which is largely those interviews. So that'll be the next time you'll see me remotely. And then at the end, September 13th in person. Any questions on the scope or timeline of the study?
Any questions? All right.
Okay. Next, I just wanted to dive into some data just to get you guys thinking about a little bit about the housing market. And some of this might not be a surprise to you at all. The first kind of thing that I dug up and looked into was population, how the DOA is projecting the city's population will change over the next 20 years. And they're projecting a decrease in population, although they're projecting an increase in population in surrounding towns and in the county. So what that says to me is there's an opportunity to get people in the city of Rhinelander. People are going to be coming to the area if the right amenities are there, if the right type of housing that people are looking for at the right price point is there, you have an opportunity to capture some of that growth. So that's a good opportunity to see and realize. The second thing is the increase in those age 65 plus. So that's telling us that that subset of the population is going to have a specific demand for housing. So that's going to kind of dictate what housing is needed in the city over the next 5 to 10 years, maybe more so than other groups. And the population at that age cohort, they're staying in their homes longer. So that's also going to keep a supply of what we generally think of as first-time homeowner, lower price, single-family homes. Those aren't going to be coming onto the market because people are staying in their homes longer. So that's another factor that we'll consider and work through in the housing study. As far as units and price point, this jumped out at me, the top graph showing just the age of housing in the city. Probably no surprise to you, it's quite an older housing stock, which is good and it's bad. So it's good because it's more affordable. The downside is, can renters and owners find what they're looking for? Is the quality there? So those will be a few things we'll explore in the study. And then the bottom 2 graphs I have, so the dashed line is showing what a monthly affordable housing cost is for a renter and a homeowner. And the orange lines are showing actually what people are paying in the city of Marshfield, Rhinelander, what they've been paying over the past 10 years. And you'll see for homeowners, mortgage payments have on average been generally affordable. For renters, it's been a little bit of a different story. So what people have actually been paying has generally been above an affordable threshold. And when I say affordable, that means that they're paying more than 30% of their gross income towards rent. So that was something interesting that jumped out at me. And then the last slide I have is about cost burden. And when I say cost burden, I'm talking about people who are or households who are paying more than 30% of their gross income towards rent. So even though it seems generally homes single-family homes, owner-occupied homes are more affordable in the city. There still is a subset of the population that is paying a higher amount, over 30% on housing, and that number is about 23%. Similarly, with renters, about 39% of renters are considered cost burden. So that's a little bit higher than we'd like to see, but it's pretty typical for most communities we work in. There's generally a higher level of cost burden for renters because there's a barrier to entry for home ownership. So those are the first few things, just starting to look at the data that jumped out at me, and I wanted to put those things in front of you guys to get any reactions you might have. Were there any surprises? Was this, you guys probably anticipated some of this? I'm looking for some feedback from you.
Actually, I thought it might be a little higher.
The cost burden?
Correct.
Yeah, the renter was interesting for me. 'Cause it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there have been a lot of apartment units that have gone up recently. And I don't know the price point on those, but generally more expensive for newer development. I guess if no one has any other reactions to the data, now I just wanted to hear from you guys. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, you know, we have a goal for the housing study, but are there other specific things that you are hoping to get from this? We got it covered.
Becky, this is Zach. We were talking about really actionable strategies to come out of this. Maybe give a preview of what that might entail.
Yeah, so that's a really important part of the study. And so at the end, there's going to be a strategy, a toolbox of strategies that you can use. And they're going to cover all different topics. So there are going to be recommendations for policies, recommendations for funding programs, be that local, state, or federal, that you can tap into. Those are going to be recommended partnerships, because all of this is going to be partnerships. That's kind of the overarching theme in every housing study I do, is communities can do a lot, but we're still going to need partnerships with local organizations, more support at the state, more support at the federal level. So there may be some recommendations there. There are going to be some strategies for communication as well. So really just a whole, toolbox that you can pull from based on the different issues that crop up during the housing study. We'll make sure that they relate specifically to your needs, but they'll be based on things that we've seen other communities try and have seen success with. So I think there'll be some good stuff in there at the end for you guys, especially with the number of communities that have been interested in housing studies lately. I think we've seen a lot of communities ask for help and talk to a lot of communities about what they're struggling with and what they've tried that has worked and what they've tried that hasn't worked. So I think there'll be some good stuff in there at the end.
Tom.
In this study, you showed that there's going to be within the year 2020 and 2040, what was it, a 8% decrease in population for us, but an increase for our surrounding area. In this study, by the end, are you going to be able to provide us with options or suggestions on how to turn that around?
Yeah, so the housing recommendations are going to be part of that, but we're also going to look at other kind of quality of life things, and those are things that might crop up in interviews when we ask people, so what attracts you to live in Rhinelander? What are some things that might be attracting you to live in other places that Rhinelander doesn't have? So we're going to make some recommendations on some of those kind of more quality of life things too, because we realize that it is a whole package. When people look for a place to move, they're looking for housing, probably most importantly, but they're also looking at schools, they're looking at taxes, which there isn't a ton we can do, but they're looking at parks, they're looking at city services, they're looking at things to do just in general. So we'll dig into those just a little bit, not as deep as the housing stuff, but yes.
And what about employment rates? Like
Yeah,
people
so we're gonna,
offering jobs?
yeah.
And
Yeah, so we're going to look at employment rates. I'm hoping, we haven't dug into it yet, but I'm hoping there's some regional data, maybe some projections about the area that we can use.
Okay, thank you.
And interviews will be another part of that too, talking to hopefully at least one major employer to get a sense of what hiring outlook is, if there are any closings or expansions that you guys know of, definitely taking that into account too when we do the recommendations.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We look forward to talking
Yeah.
to you some more and getting this product moving.
Yeah. I guess with that, any other concerns just up front that you guys want me to know about as I dig into the data? Any concerns you have about housing in the city?
One of the questions that Becky had in the documentation she sent me was, are there housing related programs or policies or strategies you've seen in other communities that interest you? I mean, that's something that we need to get pull from the council of what you guys would like to see if you've seen stuff in other communities. Because, you know, I don't know where you've lived. Maybe you've lived here forever, but
I have a couple of things for that. We've looked out too with a new inspection department and whatever is rehabbing some of our housing stock because we've had a lot of our houses here in town, and I believe it's at 60% are rental. And that being the case, as other places become available, how do we get first homeowners in there with rehabbing that stock? We reached out to both Manitowoc in Ashland, Marinette and Ashland, to receive some of their programs. So we'll hand that over to you as far as how those programs could be a part of it. Number two, with a hospital buyover, if you could give us a golden ball or shake and figure out what they're going to do with that as far as specialties and or otherwise in this area, because we are considered a medical hub right now, yet it's been on a decline. So how do we recapture that and look for those as far as professionals and housing them? We're in an interesting time, and I'm pretty sure Becky understands that too, with the flux of people coming north as far as that goes. How do we account for those things? So I guess those are questions inside the scope that need to be answered, but if you can do it now, great.
Definitely have to dig into those a little bit more. The hospital will be one we'll probably want to reach out to see what their hiring outlook is and what kind of salaries, hourly wages they're anticipating to make sure that the housing lines up with those.
So do we send you directly when we have ideas of what we'd like to see? And
I'm probably thinking Zach would want to be a clearinghouse for that.
Okay.
So I would think Zach, everything would go to Zach and then he'd push it on to us.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. And if there are things you don't want to see, let me know that too. I've had communities tell me, we don't want to do this. This isn't going to work here. So just knowing that, and we can dig into it a little bit more, but that's helpful also.
Thank you. All right.
All right. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it and look forward to meeting some of you hopefully on July 13th at the public meetings.
Excellent. All righty. Moving on. Mayor's comments. This is going to be a little long-winded today. First of all, I'd like to read a declaration. Today, here in the city of Rhinelander, we'd like to make it World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Whereas older adults deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, enabling them to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and vital participating members of our communities. Whereas in 2006, the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, in support with the United Nations International Plan of Action, proclaimed the day to recognize the significance of elder abuse in public health and human rights issues. Whereas 2021 marks the 15th annual Elder Abuse Awareness Day, its recognition will promote the better understanding of the abuse and the neglect of older adults. Whereas the National Center of Elder Abuse and the City of Rhinelander recognize the importance of taking action to raise awareness, prevent, and address elder abuse. And whereas, as our population lives longer, we are presented with the opportunity to think about our collective needs for the future as a nation. And whereas ageism and social isolation are major causes of elder abuse in the United States, and whereas recognizing it is up to all of us to ensure the proper social structures exist and people can retain community and societal connections, reducing the likelihood of elder abuse. Whereas preventing abuse of older adults through the maintaining and improving of social support like senior centers, human services, and transportation will allow everyone to continue to live independently as long as possible and contribute to the life and the vibrancy of our communities. Whereas, where there is justice, there can be no abuse. Therefore, the NCEA urges all people to restore justice by honoring older adults. Whereas, joining us in engaging and empowering the movement and putting an end to the abuse. Therefore, I, Christopher Frederickson, Mayor of the City of Rhinelander, do hereby proclaim tomorrow, 15th, 2021, as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day in Rhinelander. Thank you. Moving on, we have a couple of neat initiatives that have taken off with some press releases this week, and I wanted to kind of kick them off here also with an announcement. The Hodag Park improvement is slated to start this summer. The plans that we put in action. Parks add a scenic and recreational value to Rhinelander community, yet many of our city parks suffered from limited reinvestment, inconsistent development, and lack of strategic planning. To remedy this, in 2014, we fostered a comprehensive park plan that came from key stakeholders that will break ground this summer at Hodag Park. Hodag Park improvements aim to improve the access to the park's natural resources, enhance the opportunities for outdoor recreation, promote public use with new attractions, updates, amenities, and create a community-oriented space. The press release is quite long, so I'm just going to skip to the next part. Phase 1 of the Hodag Park's improvements will begin this summer, which will include the building of structures for the amphitheater and the entertainment area. Tentative completion of Phase 1 is scheduled for spring of 2022, at which time an opening celebration will take place. Subsequent phases of the project will be announced at later dates. That being the case, there's a chance to raise funding. We received an anonymous donation of $100,000 to kick off a fundraising campaign, so it'll be matched up to that $100,000. On the press release, there's different ways that you can get your donations in, but it's being housed by the, all right, help me out here now. The Rhinelander Community Foundation's website. So that's where the funds are being housed so that we can collect them. So if anybody needs to, there's 4 or 5 different ways to look it up, and I'm not going to explain it here. That being the case, it's also exciting as we move forward as a city. On June 1st here in 2021, we received a letter, and it's a letter of dedication for a splash pad. And this came from the Lions that pledged to donate to the city and or through the community foundation $35,000 for the construction of a splash pad. So I think we understand where our project number 2 is headed. That also once again can be housed at the Rhinelander Community Foundation. So we're moving forward with some of these. Last but not least, we see some recognition from the United States Census Bureau. And I had to read this because I think it was pretty slick. Thank you for your valuable participation in the decennial. Thank you. You don't say that word too often. So when you look at it, you're like, decennial census. With your support, the region exceeded the national self-response rate of 67% and had the highest self-response rate among all regions at 69.8%. So that's pretty slick that we responded that highly. Once again, I appreciate our public participation we do have in government here. And that's just a good show of it. So that's why I wanted to announce that. That takes care of my mayor's comments. Meeting minutes, this is page 4 in your packet.
Daniel, make a motion to accept the meeting minutes for Monday, May 24th as presented. Anderson, second.
Anderson, that's such a wonderful, to hear you say that.
Anderson, second.
Yeah, we did it right. We have a motion and a second by Gerald. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Reports from boards, commissions, and committees. Report from the April 23rd, 2021 Police and Fire Commission is on page 7 in your packets.
Daniel, make a motion to accept the Police and Fire Commission meeting minutes dated April 23rd, 2021.
Barnett, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Report from the June 1st, 2020 Planning Commissions, page 12 in your packet.
Anderson, I move approval of the June 1st, 2021 Plan Commission minutes.
Mikulowski, second.
Did I say accept or approve? Accept is what it should be.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Once again, I'd like to thank Gerald for his participation in that and moving that product forward and some of the other things that are going on. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Public hearings, Hodag Cab Company on taxi cab license application. This is page 14 in your packet.
Just as a point of information, there was an additional attachment that was shared today by the clerk related to the inspection form for the 3 vehicles.
I'm with that, Zach. All right. Your name? Yeah. Oh, I clicked it. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Cheryl Salzman. I'm one of the owners. And this is Kim Rogers. She's the other owner. I mean, is there any other, do you guys have questions right away?
Are there any questions for Cheryl? Nope.
Okay. We actually did get a letter of recommendation from the Tavern League, if you guys want to look at that.
Can we keep it, put it on file?
I'm sorry?
Can we keep it to put it in file?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then, I mean, I guess I'm not sure what you guys are looking for as far as,
You don't have to say anything at all. This is a public hearing.
Okay.
So basically what it allows is the people to speak for and or against something that's before council.
okay.
So if there's really nothing either against or for, then there's really not much to say on
And
it.
you guys don't have any other questions?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, I
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, so for that sake, I have to ask this question 3 times. Is there anybody else that would like to speak at this public hearing? Second time, is there anybody else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Gerald,
I just had a question about the inspection report. That means all 3 vehicles are now acceptable?
yes. And for a third and a final time, is there anybody in the public that would like to speak in this public hearing? The public hearing is closed on this issue. Thank you. Under ordinances, our first reading, ordinance 2021-7, the map amending and zoning changes for the 903 Boyce Drive RH 9107-0602. Presenting zoning is CB, Community Building District. Proposed zoning is PD, Planned Development District, for the purpose of locating a multifamily housing student housing, restaurants, and retail and office space. This is page 15 in your packet. Gerald?
As I read the zoning code, it sounds like the general development plan is part of getting a rezoning. So it seems to me that we ought to take item 13A before we do the map amendment.
It's just the first reading, so I don't know if Steve was maybe going to say something too. So, yeah, the GDP obviously is they're wound together. However, the way the Plan Commission referred this item to the council, they appear separately. So the map amendment is a zoning concern with an ordinance versus the other one being simply a majority approval.
Yeah, and just so everybody understands that we're not voting on this ordinance amendment tonight. It's on for discussion tonight. We would vote on the ordinance amendment at the next meeting, when it would be the theoretic second reading. What? I think I'm correct. Okay. So, just so everybody understands that, so it's really not adverse, because if we didn't approve the development plan, there may be no reason to vote on it next time. Does that make sense, Gerald?
As much sense as the two reading requirement makes.
Well, well, understand, just so this public understands why that occurs, in the old world, when we didn't have a meeting of the whole, so to speak, you would have a committee look at it, and the committee would report it, and so the only time the council would see it is when they were voting on it. Well, now the council has a chance to see it twice. They get to see it the first time it's introduced, where they can chit-chat about it, talk about it, explain it, whatever else, and then the next time they can vote on it. This gives the council the ability to look at this twice rather than just once. And that's why it's the way it is. We don't have to call it a first and second reading. We can call it a discussion item if you'd rather, and then we can call it an action item at the next meeting. That may make more sense.
No action is required. Moving on. Ordinance, second reading, ordinance 2021-6, amending 5.0213, the electrical contractor's license. This is page 16 in your packet.
Daniel, make a motion to pass the City of Rhinelander Ordinance 2021-06, repealing 5.02.13 electrical contractor license.
Anderson, second.
I think Holt beat you there, that one. So David Holt with the second. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Interesting portion, and I'm getting off topic. We'll move on. Unfinished business from previous council meetings. The mayor's veto of the change order number 14, the matching funds for the snowmobile crossing, as it was passed by the May 28th Common Council meeting. This is page 17 in your packet. Mayor?
So everybody understands what this is, because I think it's important to understand this, is the mayor this is what's called a veto message. The mayor is telling you that he is vetoing an action that was taken by the council at its previous council meeting. That does not require any action by this body. It's telling you that he has vetoed it, so it will not take effect unless someone brings it back to override the mayor's veto. So you have to affirmatively make an motion to move to override the mayor's veto if you wish to do that.
And once again, before I call on you, Ryan, on page 18 is our current ordinance on the snowmobile crossing there. So page 19 and 20 basically are the change orders, the parts that we accepted. So you have both the historical and the actual right there in that order as far as it goes. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak because I made the motion. And I don't know, I'm not sure if Mayor is able to, in a nutshell, kind of explain why you vetoed this. We had a brief discussion on that, and I'm in agreement with what you said, Mayor. So I do favor tourism and recreation in Rhinelander. So maybe a brief explanation would be beneficial on this, if you don't mind.
Sure. If I went back 3 years, I recollected, and Tom Roser also got up to support that, was that the crossing was to be looked to move outside either the city or whatever based on the snowmobile club's recommendation that way. That being the case, it didn't happen in that time. I believe, as Mark stated, that they couldn't find someplace suitable. But yet at the same time, when we had the discussion, Menominee and, gosh dang it, what was the other road? We're getting really ripped up, and we weren't going to allow those to continue to get ripped up. So putting the crossing there was disadvantageous to our taxpayers to be paying for roads. That being the case, when we look back at the history of that crossing had changed a few different times, and it never changed in our ordinance. So it was pertinent for this body to understand where it could move to, where it should move to, before we invest any more of the taxpayers' dollars on that, just because it didn't happen during this period of time from the time that we started this project till now. Does that make sense?
Right. So in a nutshell, we're looking for a better trail crossing location.
Yeah, make sure that the Snowmobile Club does their due diligence. If we're going to put it somewhere, it's permanent and smart and doesn't cost us our resources either over and over again. I don't know what those other roads that it crossed that are like now, or if we had fixed them since then, and that's why we moved it. I really don't know that history.
And Mark and I are meeting with the club on the 28th of this month to talk about those alternatives, to just kind of get a sense from them long-term where they want to be, and I think where the city ultimately can find some form of compromise.
I have a question.
Okay, sorry, I've been looking that way, because, sorry. Gerald?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you plan that, because it seems like the city staff needs to do something on this too, to see where the future is, because right now there's signs out there directing people to that crossing. And it seems to me either we need to remove those signs or decide we're going to go with that.
Absolutely. David?
Yeah, you said you're meeting on the 28th. That is our next council meeting. Is it possible for you to give an update on that?
Yeah, our meeting is right before our council meeting, so we should be able to get an update at that meeting.
And I believe Mark, maybe that night he even, it was a part of the meeting minutes, said that this is not necessarily something that has to happen during this project per se. It can happen afterwards. Is that correct, Mark? Yeah. He's nodding.
In fact, it likely would be cheaper than the cost we were seeing on this because of the federal wage rates.
So if there's no action, we'll move further. All right. Thank you. Discuss policy for public surveillance cameras.
This was an item that was been discussed at previous council meetings. The last action was to do some research to understand what municipalities have for policies. So I've got a call out to peers for input. I have yet to receive any responses, so I'm hopeful that folks are either working on a response to me as to what their policies are. There's also a question, it's somewhat related to the borrowing item that's also on our agenda this evening around the financing of such cameras. So I think at this point, we should have, hopefully for the next council meeting, another update with some more information based upon that. But at least, it's not a matter, I think, of if, it's a matter of how and when, probably, as it relates to the financing side of it.
Thank you guys for working on that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. No other questions?
I guess if there's any other input folks have, and individually be great if you have some, I know where Tom's mind's at, but if others have thoughts around city parks or other areas of priority as we draft a policy, I think it would be helpful to get that input before we bring something to the council.
Ryan also had ideas with that. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the feasibility, but some of our major intersections, would be beneficial to cover. I'm not sure if parks are necessarily absolutely needed, but, you know, downtown, definitely Brown Street beneficial. But some of those thoroughfares where we could capture high traffic areas for crashes or things that would capture vehicles that are involved in criminal activity late at night would be advantageous.
Thank you. Moving on, discuss approve resolution 2021-13 to grant Hodag Cab Company its taxi cab license. Page 21 in your packet.
Barnett, I will make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-13 to grant Hodag Cab Company a taxi cab license.
Daniel, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations. Thank you. Discuss and approve the city's organizational chart per 2.01234A3. This is an add-on item also that Zach had in your mailbox.
Yeah, you all should have a paper copy in front of you. A couple of highlights, added the residents of Rhinelander, citizens of Rhinelander as most org charts reference. There's also a couple of other areas under the city administrator, the third one from the left, the city engineer. Presently, we have a vacant position, the director of public works. At this point in time, we're proposing to retitle that position to city engineer and begin recruitment subsequent to your adoption to this evening, or hopeful adoption this evening. I think the key thing there is, you know, we presently use a contract engineer, and we probably would still use contract engineering services for a variety of reasons. However, having a resident engineer would offer a tremendous benefit. I think, case in point, the Stevens Street project, we've run into some warranty concerns and performance things related to the contractor, and having a resident engineer to do that analysis and oversight would be advantageous. We also added the human resources generalist position to that point. Given that the city has prioritized human resource activity with a more of an empowered role, I anticipate there might be some evolution to that position as well over time, but right now it's the human resources generalist. And then now that we've unwound building inspections from the fire department, you'll see building inspector, zoning administrator. In fact, Robbie started today. Unfortunately, he couldn't stay for our meeting this evening, but we'll make sure that he gets introduced to you all at the next meeting. But Robbie will be based, presently we're keeping the inspection office at the fire department for the interim kind of time being until the construction season is over, and we're going to be discussing alternatives to that. And then fire chief, you'll see we've got a vacant, as you're all aware, a vacant fire chief position. We've got an interim in that role. We removed the assistant fire chief from the organizational chart. Again, discussion ongoing related to evolution. Since we unwound the inspections from that office, the decision, at least at this point in time, since that position is vacant and we won't be recruiting for it in the near term, to remove that from the organizational chart. If you move down to the lower level there, just because of space and how this was laid out, we had a retitling of the Parks, Buildings, and Grounds foreman. Right now, Jeremy Biolo is our Parks Director. Discussed with him about the retitling. It's a little more reflective of his actual duties, and we're going to be digging into job descriptions as we go forward. So you'll see that there, as well as a retitling of the foreman as a lead to be consistent with the other public works areas. One note as well, the wastewater treatment department, those are not direct reporting relationships. I just need to move the lines around there so they're more reflective of the way the other ones are. We also added the museum employees. Now that they're employees of the city and subject to the city's policies, you'll see them underneath the parks arrangement as well. And then finally, we're proposing a retitling of a position that will become vacant. We'll be recruiting, and that's the finance assistant. Right now, it's a utility clerk, utility billing clerk / finance assistant. I think we're going to retitle it finance assistant, at least for recruitment purposes. So yeah, I think that kind of covers the high level details. Happy to answer any questions or discuss this further.
Eileen.
As far as the city engineer goes, is there a different job description than the public works director, and is that made public?
Yeah, it will be. In fact, Doreen and I are just putting some finishing touches on it. Didn't want to be too presumptive about the filling of it, but basically taking, it's really empowering the public works, but requiring the engineer's credential, the professional engineer PE credential. But yeah, the description will be made available and it'll be recruited for subsequent again to our approval tonight, or eventual approval, hopefully.
Thank you.
With that, I'll accept the motion.
Can
Yep, go ahead, Steve.
And the other thing I think you need to know is, if this is approved, we'll go through all of the ordinances and make all of the changes once these titles and this schematic diagram, what do you want to call it, is approved. Because I've already identified several places that we have to make changes to make that conform to the ordinance. Those would be pretty much Scribner changes. They wouldn't really need action, but we'd certainly tell you where all those changes were made, because we're not changing any of the meaning of the ordinances, we're just clarifying the language of the ordinances.
As we move forward as an administrative staff, one of the things we look for is the efficiencies, our needs, and where are our obstacles. And the org chart as it sits was another way to clean some of those up when it came to communications and moving product through. That being the case, when he talks about cleaning up our ordinances also with that, because there are different parts of the ordinances, just as an update, and this will come before council, but just our zoning and recoding in municipal code, because of the large amount of it, was a $7,370 expense. So even when it comes to the Scribner's errors or the changes, doing them all at a certain time, it is an expense to change it. So we will look at that and do the due diligence on those also prior. It's to not stop the action of moving it forward, so he can recruit, do whatever we need to do, but at the same time understanding that there's a process to it, and it's a long and lengthy process. Gerald? I'm going to ask you to push your button so it can be recorded. There you go.
I pushed it twice. I move approval of the organizational chart as presented.
Holt, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Gerald?
I still have a question, but two questions. The city engineer would be a staff position essentially, wouldn't be in charge of any other people.
That's a great question. So the way the organizational chart is reflected presently, it is not. Historically, the Director of Public Works, they all report it up. And so at this point in time, for recruitment purposes, I don't know ultimately what candidate pool we're going to be working with. So I propose that we make that kind of a standalone. I could see evolutionary potentially having the conversation back with the council about restructuring, but at this point in time, for recruitment purposes, I'm proposing to pull that out and still have the foreman, the four foremen report directly to the administrator.
The other question I had is, you talk about positions being unwound. I think it was your term. Yeah. Is the IT coordinator now unwound from the police department?
On the organizational chart, yes, but her office is still at the police department, and depending on the consolidation project, that may or may not change. I'm not sure, but right now that's where the infrastructure is planned to be housed. So, yeah, but good question. I mean, they're all kind of general fund budgeted positions. So, aside from some of the utility stuff, the org chart is reflective of the actual.
Thank you for the questions, Gerald. I really do appreciate it, even if I laugh out loud. Carrie?
Has the staff seen this org chart at any department head meetings, and what is their take on it?
We've had some discussion with all of them. I mean, really, that's where the recommendation for the city engineer came out, was really a desire that we probably have a gap in proficiency in our engineering area, just kind of on in-house type engineering activities. I mean, most of the staff are here, so if there are questions, they certainly want to air them. But I think at this point, there's general consensus that, it all depends on the person, ultimately, right, in our recruitment. So thankfully, having Doreen and HR to go through some of the discussion on this, I mean, I don't know, we had probably 3 months of some form of conversation about this topic, and now we're just ready to bring it forward.
When it says discussion, part of that is even as you build a process of efficiency or whatever is when they get moved in. I think Josh would be the one that would maybe be the least experienced with seeing it and then turning around and understanding where it was, just because of where that process was. To get to an assistant chief and then an assistant chief filled in for the chief fill in, it was a fast and drastic position, which was hard just to get him to understand where that was, and then removing of inspections. So when you ask that, if it's been a long, lengthy discussion with him, no. Awareness, I believe everybody was aware. No? Yeah.
Well, Josh, when you and I met last Friday, I
Go
believe.
ahead, come up to the mic.
Yeah, come to the podium so that way we can make sure everyone can hear you. We talked about the vacancy last Friday in the inspection office. Obviously, we didn't create an additional position within the city. It was a lateral move, moving that position from the fire department to the inspection office. But like I said, depending on future conversations, since that role, we'd have to do probably a job description questionnaire, a process with Doreen, and Doreen can probably come up and speak to it more elaborately. But about 65% or so of the assistant chief's job was inspections office. So now not having that tied with the fire department, obviously that whatever that position is going to evolve. And you and I talked about some of the options: ambulance administration, training management. I mean, those types of things are certainly on the table for further consideration.
Yeah, the conversation, most of his job was taken up by inspection department, and he was falling short on what he should be doing as the assistant fire chief. I don't think that validates removing the assistant chief from the fire department at all. That is a necessary job that is needed, just like the captain's job in the police department. You can't just cut it without discussing with us at all.
Well, I'm
totally blindsided by this.
Sure. What I'm saying that the position is currently vacant, and the idea is that we'll still develop the updated job description and then bring the org chart back through once the justification has been made for the filling of the position.
Well, I guess it's not very transparent to me what happened there, because none of this was discussed as if we had a meeting on Tuesday and about what the job would be entailing, and now it's just gone. I would like that portion to be removed from your workflow or your.
I'm hearing what you're saying. I guess in terms of semantics and process, I don't want to put an org chart out in front of the public by not having the position filled, I mean, especially with the vacancy being created there and not being, from a transparency standpoint, what is that position performing for the city, right? What's the role? And you and I had conversation about it, but until it's reduced to writing and a job description is created, I still propose that we eliminate it from the org chart at this time, because we're not actively recruiting for it. The budget has not been established. The council hasn't approved a budget to retain an additional position with the city, in effect creating another position.
We're not recruiting for it because we're paying off the benefits of the previous fire chief and the assistant chief. That's why we're currently not recruiting for it.
Sure.
If we had some planning and paid for his benefits like we all know are coming, we could be recruiting for it, thus won't be eliminating that position.
But I'm saying the council hasn't approved a budget to create an additional position with the city. So by leaving the assistant fire chief in there, we're creating another position, and we're not proposing to do that at this time.
The position exists, though. It's not creating another one. It's already there. You really created an inspector job, not an assistant chief job. That's the new position. We already have our position.
Yeah, and I guess maybe Doreen's standing up behind you. Maybe she wants to chime in here, but I think we're maybe talking past each other in terms of really around semantics. We've got to get a budget approved, to get the position created, and move through the process. I don't know, Doreen, do you have anything to add substantially?
I just wanted to talk to what Josh was referencing.
Go ahead and step to the mic, though.
Sorry. So with the current org chart, it's current state. It doesn't mean that the position will never come back. We have to look at what do we currently have for positions that either, like the engineer position we're going to recruit for, and all the other positions on that chart are filled. So it's current state. It doesn't mean that we won't come back and we won't reevaluate the position for assistant fire chief. It's just not here right now. It's current state of affairs. So it doesn't mean it's totally off the table. That's not what this is about. It's current state. so.
We had an org chart that we had positions that weren't filled or things that weren't there. And then obviously ordinances that were built on it based on whether or not it was a public works director or whatever. As we move to either a different model or a different thing, which is the purview of the city administrator to bring forward an organizational chart as he sees fit to make us efficient or whatever, this was a part of the process. Now in that process, you have step 1 to step 2 to step 3. Once again, we went through a disadvantageous loss of a chief and the assistant chief. But what did that mean? Well, we understood inspections no longer were going to sit there because there was no way to fill them in. You know, at that point, we met with the fire department at least twice, as far as that goes, about getting those certifications or anything else. Met with either some resistance, some application of it being possible, move forward with an inspector. So it's a process, as you talk about having an org chart that sits there and then not be filled or is readdressed. This is his opportunity to readdress it.
And it, like Zach said, it's evolving. This isn't the final state.
No.
It's going to evolve. And unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me to look at the water department. That might be something that you want to go down in that next layer under Tom.
Right.
I don't recall if the lead is still there or
Yep.
if that changed. So saying that is, you look at the water department underneath Tom as a lead position, having discussions with him more recently, he may not decide not to fill that position and go a different direction with the opening. So again, it's evolving. Those conversations are going to have to continue to take place just with the fire department, Wendy's team, all the different areas. Those are ongoing conversations. Because what you don't want to do is create an org chart and say, this is it, nothing's ever going to change, because that's not the way business is and that's not the way personnel goes either. Employees change, they grow, they leave, you backfill and you look at what your needs are, or you streamline a process, which means that things are always evolving. So again, this is current state of what's currently being recruited for, or what's currently filled. So.
And I'm not sure if Wendy has any additional, she just came up to the podium, but I would also add that I think the last action on the city's org chart was in maybe 2017. So in terms of recruitment and selection and placement, having at least a current updated reflective org chart is of critical importance, I think, for everybody in their current positions to know kind of where they fall and where the org chart sits ultimately.
I just wanted to remind you of how this relates to the budget. And as you were talking about unwinding some of the positions, I believe we're in the second year that the assistant fire chief's wages, 91% of those salary and benefits are actually being charged to the inspection department. So it's not even in the fire department budget, even though it was the assistant fire chief. So only 9% was being charged to the ambulance. It's already been pulled out of there prior to us hiring the building inspector. And then I also wanted to comment on going back to Gerald's question about the IT being wound out. The IT budget, the salaries is in the IT budget. It's not in the police department budget. So even though her office is at the police department, it doesn't have anything to do with their budget, just so that you have a financial idea of where the things are.
I think one other point on the wastewater treatment facility, I know Jim and I have talked about potentially creating a lead man position for them. You'll notice that there isn't a lead under the foreman in the treatment plan, and so that's another example of an evolutionary discussion that should we decide to bring that forward, if it's decided as advantageous, then certainly we'll, the org chart come back next meeting for all that matter, if that's the case with updates.
Yeah, Tom's wages were part of the inspection department, and it was taken out of that budget. But the secretaries are always in the fire department budget for some reason, even though they have nothing to do with the fire department. All the bills that the inspection department creates come through the fire department. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul here. So I know that Tom's wages are over there, but we cover half the wages for the secretaries too.
Understood. We know it wasn't pretty.
I don't really appreciate that comment of robbing Peter to pay Paul, because it's all designated to the right area where we're not taking fire department money. That's where we put the allocation to pay for the inspection miscellaneous, the administrative inspection personnel. It's a process of unwinding the inspection from the fire department. We only took the first step of 91% of the assistant fire chief. For the 2022, we're gonna pull everything out, but we were doing it in pieces.
Thank you. Tom?
I have a couple of concerns. One, the fact that he feels that he was blindsided by this, and it very well probably is a case of semantics and all that kind of stuff, but he seems pretty upset about this, and I don't have enough information to decide whether he should be upset about this or not. I feel like this should be postponed until the next meeting, until you guys can figure it out with him and put his mind at ease that this is the proper thing to do, because he seems really confused and blindsided by this, and that's not what we want either, is it? I'm just...
So you're making a motion to table this till the next meeting?
Sure, I'll make a motion to table this till the next meeting.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second, and that takes care of that.
Did you have a first motion, though?
It's not just
There's a
debatable.
It's not debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Takes a 2/3 vote, you should take a roll call.
Please call roll.
Thomas Kelly.
Aye.
Ryan Rossing.
Aye.
Eileen Daniel.
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski.
Aye.
Gerald Anderson.
Nay.
Thomas Barnett.
Aye.
David Holt.
Aye.
Andrew Larson. Sorry.
The ayes have it, and it will be tabled to the next meeting. All right, where are we at? E, discuss and approve UW Capstone course sustainability plan recommendations and the progress. I'm going to ask Jim to come up and just run through this real quick, the light fixtures. This is one of the things where we moved some sustainability forward to look at the feasibility of it and now how that comes out in action. So
a rough count on light fixtures between the wastewater treatment plant and the wells and towers came out to about 400 fixtures for a grand total of 760 fluorescent bulbs and about 90 other bulbs. Upgrading these to LEDs is not as simple as just changing the bulb. Every one of these fixtures should be rewired. So the total rough cost, without an electrician, that's with assuming city staff will handle the change outs and the rewiring, is $43,000. And with a payback of $800 to $900 a year, was that the estimate on payback?
$983, yeah.
So we're looking at
43 years to pay back. That being the case, I'm going to ask Zach to chime in when it comes to focus on energy and some of the other possibilities. But you get a rough estimate as we work through this product, what we're looking for with payback. But
Yeah, I mean, there definitely was beneficial results from the effort that Jim put in on this, because our Focus on Energy rep will be who has governmental incentives to be able to take on a project like this to make it more feasible, essentially cost effective for us. He's actually going to be in Rhinelander in the near future, and so we're going to be working through that with him, as well as other opportunities that we might have for beyond just the lighting that's been discussed thus far.
yeah, so just for council's purpose, what I wanted to show is as we make a policy movement and we direct our work staff to gather that information, we get more exact numbers, which turn around and we saw with the organizational chart, as you whittle it down to get the information to the people, you'll get a better decision. That being the case, at $43,000, it would take us 44 years to start making money on it. So it's not going to happen at this point. Now we'll focus on energy. If they have a grant that says we'll come in and change them, or whatever, once again, we're back on the table. So we're just moving through the steps that we need to be more sustainable. I really appreciate Jim's extra effort on this, because this was just kind of my little pet to start moving it forward, thinking it was going to be easy. And it was a pretty quick decision that it's not as easy as we think. So, thank you, Jim. I really do appreciate it. We don't need to have any action on that. Discuss and approve the pre-sale reports from 2021 debt financing and refinancing and the potential authorization to proceed with the financing plan. This was an add-on.
Hey, Sean, looks like you're unmuted. You have the ability to share your screen if you wish to do so. Otherwise, the council has been shared with the attachments. They were in your email on Friday.
Great. No, thank you, Zach. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I've got two.
Can you get a little closer to your mic? Sorry.
It's a little quiet, Sean.
Okay, is that any better?
Marginally.
Okay, I'll try to speak a little louder, hopefully, but please interrupt me again if it's not coming through clearly. I've got two pre-sale reports for review of the council. I'll start with the larger of the two, which is a tax-exempt borrowing for governmental purpose projects and refinancing of some of the city's existing debt. So on the screen right now, I have the preliminary pre-sale report for the $4,790,000 promissory notes. And I'm going to move forward to the exhibits, which I think are the best description of the pre-sale report in total. Here we go. When we discussed the financing for new money projects that the city was considering, they fell into two categories. There's about $1 million worth of projects that will be paid back by the city's levy, and therefore capital improvements in the city, capital projects over the next couple years, 2021 and 22. And then there was also an ambulance project that is not paid by the levy, but through the ambulance fund. And when we look at new money financings, we review refinancing opportunities to see if there's the ability to save money. And two issues jumped out as candidates: the 2013A debt issue that funded a lot of the tax increment district number 9 construction projects, utilities and street projects back in 2013. And then there was also some general city projects that were done that year as well. And the 2014 note issue, which was for general city projects and a little bit for golf course projects. And what's proposed in the pre-sale report is grouping all of those purposes together into a single promissory note issue in an estimated amount of $4.79 million. Now, a couple things I wanted to review with the council with this proposed finance plan if it were to move forward. On Exhibit 2, the city is limited to 5% of your equalized value for using general obligation debt, and we would have a little bit more than 15 million outstanding, between 15 and 16 million outstanding with this issue, and your borrowing capacity is around 29 million, so you've got about 14 million approximately remaining, a little 13 to 14 million in borrowing capacity. And the blue bars, as you can see it, as you pay debt back, obviously that capacity grows. And if the equalized value of the city grows in the future, instead of it being a flat line, like you see here, it would be inclined forward. So I wanted to give you an indication of where you sat on that metric. And then secondly, this next exhibit, Exhibit 3, is looking at the impact of the new debt on the total debt payments for the city and the total debt levy. The blue bars are representative of the total debt payments, that Wendy will need to make with the existing debt as well as this proposed new debt. And as you can see, there's a big difference between the blue bars and the red bars, which are representative of how much has to go on the general debt levy. Between the two, you're using the Pratt tax, tax increment districts, and other revenues to make those payments. The red bars are what goes on your general fund budget and that you levy for each fall. And one of the strategies we've worked on with the city and we're continuing to enact with this proposed finance plan is maintaining the principal and interest debt levy at around 900,000, and that's projected for this year, 22 and 23. And then in 24 and beyond, you'll see it falls. And that's with the idea that as the city does every other year borrowing for capital improvements, there'll be some capacity to add that new debt, should the council choose to move forward with it, without driving the debt levy, hopefully, above that $900,000 target that the city has worked from in most recent years. The last exhibit is the comparison of the refunding portion of the total issue. And again, this is looking at the refunding of the 2013A and 14A issues that have interest rate ranging between 2 to 3%. Then on the right side of the page is the proposed new debt paid back over the next 10 years. And the column on the far right is the savings, which is estimated around 230,000 over the next 10-year period. And again, that was in talking about the refinancing opportunity with Wendy and with Zach, where it made some sense to combine the new money financing with the refinancing because lower interest rates are available at this point. Now, timeline-wise, the council, we wanted to discuss the plan tonight with the council. In July, we'll update the city's bond rating as well as prepare the offering statement. And we would take competitive bids on August 9th at your meeting on August 9th. And at that time, the council would be able to review the bids, and nothing is finalized or you're not committed or locked into anything until you've reviewed those bids and accept the best bid that you get to review on the 9th. And if everything is approved, about a little bit less than a month after that, the cash will be in hand for the projects. And then over the next 90 days, based on the call dates or the prepayment dates of those existing issues, we would pay those issues off and lock and finalize the prepayment of those issues, and the city would then be paying on the new debt at the hopefully lower interest rate in the future. Mayor, at this point, I can either go through the second pre-sale report, or if there's questions, I can do it whatever way you'd like.
Go ahead and go through the second. We don't have any questions at this point? Yeah, go ahead and go through the second.
Okay. The second issue is it's a refinancing of an outstanding issue that is related to the city's debt that you've issued for tax increment district number 1, which is the environmental district, the condo district that you have. There are 4 payments remaining on that debt issue, and it was an incentive financing. So the city cannot use tax exempt debt for this project because it was more for a private business incentive a number of years back, rather than for governmental purpose projects, say like streets, sewer, and water. So because of that, the federal government requires that if the city wants to issue debt like that, they can do so, but they have to use taxable debt rather than the more typical tax exempt debt. Right now, the interest rates on this debt range from 4.875 to 5.2%. We're proposing, this has been effective in a number of other instances, is instead of doing a full-blown bond issue like we talked about with the $4,790,000 issue, we would do a bank solicitation in the area around Rhinelander for this 4-year debt. And we've estimated an interest rate of about 2.5% for that issue. Hopefully that's a conservative rate. And the idea would be to get a lower interest rate to be able to save some interest costs over the next 4 years worth of payments in 2022 through 25. The plan would be to move ahead with this on a similar timeline with the other issue. It might be, it should be on the exact same timeline, in fact. But because there is not at this point an expectation that we would pay this existing debt issue off early based on the cash flow of tax increment district number 1, it made some sense to do the refinancing, and hence why, as we talked with staff about it, we wanted to make that recommendation as well tonight for the council. So Mayor, I appreciate you and the council's patience on me going through this material, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we will commence with staff on putting all the materials together, and we would be back to see you in early August related to these 2 issues.
Okay. Sean, thank you for your diligence on these issues and staff working with him, looking for cost savings for the city, and I appreciate that. At this point, I would accept the motion.
Rossing, I'll make the motion. Approve pre-sale reports for the 2021 debt financing and refinancing and potential authorization to proceed with the financing plan.
Holt, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
May I offer a friendly amendment? I think, Wendy, we wanted to include the final draft of the project list associated with that. I didn't agenda it separately, but it's obviously related and noticed appropriately.
Do I have a friendly amendment to include the final draft of the project list?
There's no such thing as a friendly amendment. I mean, if you're going to amend the motion, you could amend the motion, or you can have a new motion and withdraw the motion that's there. So your motion on the table is just to approve the 2021 debt financing and refinancing and potential authorization to proceed with the financing plan as it's stated in the agenda. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's the way I read it. Now, you want to amend that motion? Is that the idea?
That's my recommendation, yeah.
So, well, was some council member want to make the motion to amend?
I move to amend the motion to include the final draft of capital asset borrowing request.
I'll second that.
Thank you for that. As a discussion point on this, from the mayor's perspective, it allows us to understand when we have financing and we're moving forward also where it's going. So it just makes it more transparent to the public as this is the reason why we're issuing debt. So I appreciate that. Any further discussion?
On the amendment.
On the amendment. Yeah, good point. On the amendment, since it's not a cost issue, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Now, on the original motion, any further discussion?
Original motion as amended.
As amended. Original motion as amended. Please call roll.
Tom Barnett,
Aye.
Andrew Larson,
You can't unmute for some reason, he said.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson, David Holt,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing.
Aye.
The ayes have it, the motion carries. Introduction of new business, discussion and action items. Discuss and approve the general development plan for Riverview Estates LLC, 903 Boyce Drive, as recommended by the Planning Commission. This is page 22 in your packet. For all clarity of the council, a general development plan is where they come and say these are the actionable things. The specific implementation plan, which will be coming, and if you see the acronym SIP, it's there for how they will get it done. So there's two different portions there, and I know planning commission struggled with the difference in those things. And as we move through some of this stuff being new, it just gives us a little better explanation. If there's even a better explanation somebody wants to give, that's fine too. But David?
I'll make a motion to approve general development plan for Review Estates LLC, 903 Voice Drive, as recommended by Plan Commission.
Mikulowski, second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? Gerald?
Okay, I want to say I'm generally in favor of this development, but I do have a few concerns. One of them is a general concern. I have two kids who live in Seattle. Seattle has really been pushing increased density for some years now, and they kind of do it well. But I wonder if Rhinelander is ready for the kind of population density we're getting in this project. I think the developers, from their viewpoint, have that worked out pretty well as far as what they can do. But I think there are going to be some unforeseen consequences for the city. I hope it won't be for the police department, but even just one silly little thing is, if we want people to walk their dogs in the dog parks rather than in Homebow, we may need to widen the sidewalk over the bridge. You know, just things like that are going to affect the city one way or the other. My other concern is that, I mentioned Homebow, that since this is the only time the council will be considering this plan, the SIP only goes to the planning commission, it still seems to me that the general development plan ought to include something regarding an easement for access, public easement for access to Homebow. And, you know, we've heard lots of good things from the developers, and I like what you guys are saying. But when's it going to be in writing? You know, and that's my concern, that not slip through the cracks somewhere along the way. I think they have good intentions, but since this is an official policy of the city in a way, once it's adopted, I'm concerned that that's not in there.
One of the things I've learned here being on council, and this is just a personal note, even as I speak as a taxpayer or anything else, is the function and form of moving things through, first reading, second reading, or whatever, sometimes doesn't make sense because it's something that actually has to happen later. So having a generalized plan so that you can fit into the zoning to do this part, to do this part, to get financing, to do this part, always seems a little bit off. It never seems to be exact in time or in step. So I've noticed it quite a few times, even when it comes to org chart and our administrator, you know, doing the org chart, or vice versa, approving where we put a snowmobile crossing when it hasn't been there, you know, the due diligence that has done on it. So that falls upon council to be, you know, at times very picky about things and at times more relaxed about them, knowing it's coming forward. Knowing when those times are is very confusing. I mean, it's very confusing to me, or, you know, whatever, as a citizen / mayor now, is, okay, is this the moment where you stop or act or do whatever? Couple of the things that have happened is I found out that the veto works that way, and it doesn't have to be insulting. It's always been something where it's like insulting. It doesn't have to be insulting. The progress we make as a city is upon us. You're right. There's unintended consequences, needing wider things, needing light, you know, maybe lights there if there's a bunch of traffic. I do know that the developers, they did, in one of the amazing things I heard at their first presentation was the 55% green space to a house. We don't have that currently in our city, and that's why we had to rezone, because we might have ordinances that said it, but we weren't able to follow them over time. So when it comes to the density issue or whatever, some of those issues, they've done more proactive work than we have had done in the past. So I appreciate that concern, but then also the fact that they were willing to address it already in their plan. So I'm pretty comfortable with those things, and I'm not arguing with you. I agree. It's really strange to be in a position where you're accepting something before you're accepting something before you're accepting something else. But that's kind of how it's laid out. Steve, do you have anything to add to that? Or are you okay with me rambling?
You've totally confused me, so.
All right, perfect. And that was the goal, because a lot of times I sit completely confused with it. Tom, you had a question.
More of just a comment to piggyback off of what you were saying. Like you said, it's good to have concerns. It's good to question what's going to happen if we do this, what's going to happen if we do that. But at this point, we know what we desperately need in this city, and we know what needs to happen, and we can't be too nitpicky about circumstantial things when we're trying to move this city forward progressively. Housing is a desperate need that we have, and I'm all for this. If we need to widen a street here or put up an extra stoplight, okay, it's worth it to me to move the city forward by leaps and bounds. It's been stagnant for way too long.
Any other discussion? Gerald?
I had a question on page 32, which is the third from the last page in the GDP. Phase 2, it talks about adding 38 units of student housing. And from the previous information we've had, I didn't think adding student housing was part of phase 2. I wondered if we should get an explanation of that.
I'd invite either Dwight or Reggie to take it up. It's under 4. I don't know if you have your
5.
Yeah, excuse me, 5. And
I don't have a copy of it, but I do know the answer.
Okay.
The 38, right now it's 55 units in the current building. One of the wings will be taken down, which leaves us with 38 remodeled and newly renovated student housing to get rid of the institutional look from what was previously a nursing home. So we're not adding anything, we are just remodeling the current building.
So the 38, though, that you're talking about there is part of phase 1, isn't that correct? Yes.
Yeah, and so in phase 2, there is a second 38 unit apartment building. So a total, there will be 2 38 unit apartment buildings. The student housing facility, which is currently there, and additional townhomes. Phase 1 will be the 38 unit apartment complex and the remodel of the student housing.
Do we understand that 38 now? I knew that was confusing, but you are adding 38 more on in phase 2.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I have a question while Dwight was up there. From my understanding, Gerald's concerned about the Homebow, the trail system back there. I know owner from several years ago had established that that property so that there was always going to be public access to that location. I just want to make it clear for the council and the public, and maybe Dwight can answer this for himself as well, that there's going to be no sort of restriction to the public to that section of property.
Dwight, one more time for public record.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ryan. We've been working with Joel and Carrie at the Northwoods Land Trust to walk through there. We've been working with them to try and find the best spot that they want to pick for entrance into that. And yes, I'm a big fan personally of the Homebow. I love that space. It's really satisfying to walk through there, an old growth forest. So it's definitely my intention to keep public access there so people can enjoy that. And also, we will be putting in covenants and restrictions in our development to help maintain that forest and keep it a great asset for the community.
I understand Gerald's concern at this point too, is because it's not a part of this specific implementation plan and it's there, the easement's not written, and we understand you're working with them, so it's not going to be in the plan. This goes back to that step-by-step motion that is hard to accept yet at the same time.
And whenever that time comes to put it in writing, Gerald, that will be our intent, is to put it in writing, give an easement and allow public access.
Thank you. Ryan?
Mayor. Yeah, I think Dwight, from what I know about him, is passionate about trail systems and stuff in Rhinelander. But to keep using the word intent, we know how that worked with, what happened with the whole Petco thing. Their intention from 3 years was different than what the city was anticipating. So maybe a question for Steve Sorensen is, how can we move this along and know for sure that everything will be accessible in the future?
Well, ultimately, there's going to have to be a certified survey map recorded, and that certified survey map is going to have to show any easements that will be granted, and we won't approve the CSM unless those easements are on it. So I don't think you have to worry about that. You also have to rezone this property eventually with an overlay district of a PUD or a planned unit development. So there's quite a few steps where you're going to get kicks at the cat, so to speak, on that issue of the easement.
And to do the survey, to spend the money on the survey, we have to have this step done to get to that process. And
only if you don't want to waste money.
All right.
Funny, humanity doesn't get the same type of laugh. Anyway, Ryan, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank
There's
you.
stop goes on all projects, and not knowing where the appropriate stop go is hard. It's tough. But anyway.
Thanks, Ryan.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Number 35, discuss approve Eller's estimated amount not to exceed 3,120. Yeah, hello. I should really use the bifocals. I bought them. $3,120 for Riverview Estates pro forma analysis of the development agreement components. This is page 35 in your packet. Sean's on the call too if you have questions for him.
Michalowski, I'll make a motion to approve the Eller's estimate in the amount not to exceed $3,120 for the Riverview Estates pro forma analysis and development agreement.
Barnett, second.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Carrie Michalowski.
Aye.
David Holt.
Aye.
Eileen Daniel.
Aye.
Ryan Rossing.
Aye.
Gerald Anderson.
Aye.
Thomas Barnett.
Aye.
Andrew Larson.
Aye.
Thomas Kelly.
Aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss police department body worn cameras. Chief, go ahead and take the mic, please.
And actually, as some background, Andrew Larson may want to speak on this too. He and I talked this afternoon about on the topic. He was actually the one that referred. I didn't have it listed on
I
our agenda.
apologize. Andrew, go ahead and you speak first.
Yeah, I just want to keep it on our radar because I feel that we need to get them sooner rather than later. And I just want to make sure that we don't forget about it.
All right, Chief, I'm going to explain this. Obviously, we discussed this as advantageous as to whether there's federal dollars, if they were going to mandate them at some point or do other purposes, and if council and policy sees fit to move it forward before that. I have no issue with proactive nature. Go ahead, Chief.
I'm extremely for body cameras. I mean, the evolution of our profession
has been undertaking for a while now with squad cameras that record driving behavior or criminal activity. There are certain requirements for us when we interview juveniles and when we interview people that we suspect committing a felony. Those have to be audio and visually recorded. So having these type of devices, we had a device when I became chief. Apparently the previous chief had some test models around and without a policy, which I don't think is a good idea. A policy needs to come with that, so that needs to be developed. I did request that to be included in this year's borrowing, which didn't make to the final cut. To be honest, I was discouraged by that. It is something that I think our profession is moving towards. I know that there's been a task force down in Madison looking at changing and looking at law enforcement as a profession. There's been a big push to address this body cam issue. It's an extremely expensive issue. It's not the device itself, it's the storage. As we talked about with the cameras in the downtown area, it's storage is where the costs are. Part of the proposal I requested was not only the body cams, but replacing our current squad cameras, which are 15 years old. So I'd like to ask the council members, how many of you have a 15-year-old cell phone? I don't think anybody does. But that's the equipment that we're operating under at the police department.
They incentivize new phones all the time, though.
That's why I'm here, trying to incentivize the need for new cameras. So the Wisconsin Professional Police Association every year does a survey on public safety. And one of the questions they asked this year was requiring law enforcement officers in your community to wear body video cameras. An immediate priority, somewhat or of a priority. 85% of those polled in the state of Wisconsin said it's immediate priority for communities to get body cameras for their law enforcement officers. Part of the task force that I was talking about earlier in Madison came as a recommendation that the state should look at some type of funding source, but because of the cost and the current state of the Wisconsin budget, the chiefs that were involved in the task force and the chief of the police association as we talk don't see that as a reliable anything in the near future, that there's going to be any type of programs. I currently look at the federal, occasionally they do have grants for that, but again, how our department's been with grants, I would have to find some of that money in my operating budget, which has been historically cut. To be honest, it's been cut $83,000 since I've become chief. And it's frustrating when I no longer have the money to do my operating budget to purchase a squad. Those things have been cut over the last 4 years. So when it comes to body cameras, I was glad to see it was on the agenda tonight because I'm a huge proponent for it. The only other department in Oneida County that has that is Minocqua PD. They've had them for 5+ years. And they were completely donated by a community group in Minocqua. Not sure we have anybody that's a group like that in Rhinelander. I sure wish we did. So it's technology that's changing. It's something that we could use as a tool when it comes to criminal activity, interviewing suspects, recording things like that. It also could be useful in my internal investigations when it's your officer said this and this person said this, and what exactly occurred during that dynamic application of us being called to a situation. So for the record, I would like to say that I'm a huge proponent of body worn cameras, and I hope that we continue to move this forward. You'll notice in my monthly report that we did just recently have a 30-day test period on one of the quotes that we have. The officer who used it was remarkably impressed with the quality. It also aids in report writing, testimony in court, and things of that nature. So I'm hoping that we can continue to look at this as finding ways, if there's not a grant, some way to be able to make that a priority.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for being able to speak up. One of the things with even our 6-month goals and stuff is empowering our staff and our departments to direct some of the policies we set moving forward with that. So the banter back and forth and bringing it forth. First of all, I would laugh at anybody who says that the city of Rhinelander is not transparent, because we will have any discussion at any time out in front of people, and it will happen. Who had their hand up I mean, it was almost simultaneously. I'm gonna just go left to right just because it was about the same. Tom?
I'm sure it's no secret, but I'm in complete favor of the body cams. I'm still not convinced that storage is that huge of an issue. In today's technology and world, I mean, you can get 2 terabytes of space on Google Drive. I find it extremely hard to believe that there's not some sort of online cloud-based application that we could use for storage for the city. I mean, the technology is there. We just got to find it and utilize it. I have absolutely no doubt in that. The same goes for the downtown camera storage. They go hand in hand with the same thing. In today's world, as everybody knows, it's almost imperative to be able to have footage of interactions with police officers. We have a nice sleepy little town. It's great, you know, not a lot of extreme things happen. Well, compared to Chicago.
Yes.
Thank you. Compared to Chicago, we got a pretty quiet town, but it's only a matter of time before we start having escalating situations where body cams would be absolutely imperative in a court of law. I think this needs to be done sooner than later. I'd even like to see this get done before the downtown cameras get done. I think it's extremely important. So
that's on record.
I just want to clarify some of the cost, not only storage, but it's the maintenance agreements. Every program, civic service, all the programs that the city has, City Hall spends a lot of money every year on the maintenance agreements, and that's no different when it comes to technology. Those add-ons come along with the technology that we'd have to budget every year.
Even when you talk about cloud space or anything else, it's there, but it's there at a premium for the taxpayers to afford it and whatever is a part of our job with a budget and then with constraints. That being the case, to search for those avenues, it's definitely advantageous to push for the search for those and to prioritize it and prioritize based on the call for it, whether it be from our public or from our department heads, either which way.
I can guarantee that a cloud-based storage unit would be a lot more financially fiscal than trying to update our enormous servers and all that kind of stuff. It really is not that expensive to have a cloud-based thing.
The test camera we had they did hook it up to a cloud storage system. Fortunate for us, we have a new squad, and we had to update the modem in the squad to make it capable of upload. Part of that would have to be re-outfit our other marked units, because those modems in that car are at least 2 generations old. They don't have the capability to otherwise you'd have to do it internally in the office. So there's different ways in which to do that. Depending on the vendor that you go with, and they have, I think that eventually this will be an issue that will become mandated. A lot of mandates come unfunded, and this could be one of them.
All right, moving down. Carrie? Okay. Gerald?
I was going to ask for a cost figure. I see it's more complicated than just one number. And I wonder if the chief could bring us at a future meeting a breakdown of the various costs involved. I agree with Tom about the importance of this, and I also would place it ahead of the street cameras.
I certainly can do that. I have already estimates for them, for the squad cameras and the body cameras.
Eileen? Okay, excellent. Any other questions?
I do.
All right, sorry, it was a big
I
Andrew
do, Mayor.
face. It was a big face of Andrew up there, not you. All right, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so, I think in today's culture, police transparency is extremely important. Law enforcement has an extremely important job, and it seems as though it's getting tougher with more and more scrutiny. Leaders, and I want to emphasize the word leaders, they need to foster an environment, first and foremost, of protecting our officers and letting them know how important they are to our safety and security. There seems to be fewer and fewer people that are signing up to do the job. Body cameras protect officers, period. I have worked without them at the Oneida County Sheriff's Office, and I have worked with them at the Eagle River Police Department. And I can tell you that they do offer an important role. And the fact that they protect and provide an accurate representation of different situations and diverse calls that law enforcement is called upon to handle. But there is a cost, but I believe that it's worth investing in. And I agree with Tom Barnett in his comment with the storage space. I think that there's probably ways to make it happen. And I do know that the maintenance agreement is an issue, like Chief Gauthier said. And I think it's several $100s per month. So in a year's time, it's probably in that possibly $5,000 to $7,000 range. So completely in favor of it. And I think us as leaders need to push it forward and make it happen.
Thank you. David Holt.
Thank you. I agree with what my fellow council members have said. I'm in favor. I'm also in favor of it being a higher priority than the downtown cameras. Although I still want to see those downtown cameras be on the priority. I wanted to make a comment though. In the event of the sticker shock, when Chief Guthrie does give us numbers, that the comment on it will likely in the coming years become a mandate, most likely an unfunded mandate, and that if we wait until it's mandated, my suspicion is the cost would be more significant. So getting out in front of it, even if it is a cost and a significant cost, probably will benefit us down the road when it does become a mandate to be ahead of the game, rather than being forced to try to come up with some option with a deadline that somebody else set. That's all.
It's $43,000 for 7 marked cars, our 5 frontline cars, our 2 canine cars, and 7 body-worn cameras. $43,000.
And that's with maintenance, or you don't know that yet?
Yeah,
because I know that was the
that's
directive.
Cost of it.
Just to purchase.
That's the capital.
The capital expenses starting it.
The initial investment.
That's the initial investment, not the operational cost
Yeah.
year to year.
And that might, I have to go back and reread but that might be built into that.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, that's the next step. What I'd like to point out to the people at home and here is what we have is policy making happening out loud, because as we have needs and wants and desires as those happen, some of this doesn't have to be out loud. Some of it does take precedence of being out loud. I know that we're in an advantageous somewhat time where there might be funding coming for different things, but we're talking about borrowing at this point. So what we're leaning on is the principles we always went with before, knowing that there's another opportunity or other opportunities coming. And I want everybody to be fully aware of that. As far as the administrative staff, we have to build for what we know, just like a budget, you project it, and then you can make those adjustments based on that. So that's kind of where that somewhat sits. And when it comes to timelines, that's the crazy part, is where does it sit in that? I guess at a workshop, if we have a workshop about government spending and where we come and get those, what I'd like to discuss is a tolerance rating. When you have something that you think needs to happen, what is the window of tolerance to get it done? Because as I've watched government work, it's never nearly as fast as you think it should. And yet at the same time, in that tolerance, there's advantageous points where things get plugged in better. Now, Chief has looked at 2 years of being chief and being cut $83,000. That's not advantageous, and it doesn't look like it until you stand up and ask for it, and I appreciate that voice. He's very fiscally sound with his budget, and he's very fiscally sound with his department. So we appreciate that,
Sure.
Chief.
For the record, I'm entering my 5th year as chief.
Oh, yeah.
So,
come on, I've only been here a year, right?
And
Sorry.
The only borrowing that the police department has asked since I've been chief for new windows at the police department, because we've always purchased things within our operating budget, because I don't like to I don't like to borrow. I don't like to do it personally, and I don't think it's a good financial decision for the police department. But because our operating costs have been cut, now the borrowing this year for us is a squad car. We don't have that program anymore where we could replace our squads, and then we could fund some of these purchases through our operating budget.
And
now we're being forced to do it through borrowing.
Right. And even when you say force, some of that's advantageous because borrowing actually helps government at time when it's a lower interest rate that we get to bargain out. So even from his position, it's a position, where was my budget? Where did they go? From a position of a city government, it might been more advantageous to put it into a borrowing loop than it was through a budget. So those are the aspects that are from a different position, and finance would understand that. Where does that money work, when it works, and how it works? And those are, it's apples and oranges somewhat, just so council understands. It's getting to the end product where we definitely want a safe staff that's covered and moving forward with that. But thank you for that. All right.
Andrew, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's more for the chief, I guess. If, like, say by the next council meeting, if you could have a, kind of a rough ballpark of, the initial plus whatever the maintenance costs are.
I will ask I'm going to ask for a motion at this point for initial assessment and then a continued cost of body cameras so that it can be explored.
What I was getting at is just to keep it on the agenda.
If we make a motion, it's an actionable item.
Make a motion, Andrew.
When I make a motion to find out the cost of the body cameras and the maintenance fees and everything together.
Barnett, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you to the public for being patient with us and watching government work its way out. That's a good thing, though. Discuss pre-employment employee drug screens. This is Alderman Daniels. Oh, Hey, you're looking at a guy who has bifocals on his head and still misreads the stuff below it. Alderman Daniel, with no S.
Thank you.
For the record. Please, in any paper or any publication that's out there, Daniel, Alderman Daniel.
No S. Unless they're saying bad things about me, then they can put the S on the end, because then I have plausible deniability. Okay. The reason I brought this up, or asked for it to be put on the agenda, is because at the last council meeting, Carrie Bladorn did stand up and kind of brought up this topic. And so I thought it would be good to get a read from Zach on why, when this has never been an issue before, all of a sudden we're asking for our volunteers and employees through the museum complex to go through this process. And so it's mostly just for a public education.
Sure, great question. So because museum employees in the last 2 years, I believe, have become city employees, they were previously Okay. So, now with the selection and placement policy that our HR generalist has imposed and put into practice, and for the part of the liability insurance carrier, they recommend that we have updated policies and we treat our city employees indiscriminately and so equitably and consistently across the board. So, for example, if there's an accident our employee with a city vehicle, for example, we have to send that individual in for a drug and alcohol screen at that moment. But all of our new hires all must go through the same pre-employment background check, drug screen, and other components. And Doreen's standing up, so I'm assuming she'd like to speak, so I'll defer.
So it wasn't just put into place because of the selection and placement policy. If we refer back to the handbook, it states in references pre-employment, where it says medical exam, and other sections within the policy talks about work-free drug zone and policies within the policy stated in the handbook. So it isn't anything new, but for some reason we weren't following the current policy, and then we, as Zach said, we also put it in to preference what's already in the handbook as part of the selection and placement policy. So it's just doing what we've always said we were going to do, but we weren't doing it.
Is there any way Okay, because these are seasonal employees. They aren't like full-time city employees. So they're going to have to go through this like a new hire on the streets department or something would go through it on the initial hiring process, but then they don't have to do it again unless there's an accident or something, correct?
Right, yeah, we don't do randoms unless people have a CDL.
Okay.
And that's a state and federal requirement.
Right, but these are seasonal employees. They're there for what, 3 months? And so then every time they have to reapply every year. So every time they're going to have to go through a drug screening every year.
That's correct.
That is correct. I'm going to speak to, one of the things I said in the past was we will follow policy and procedure at this point till we change policy and procedure. And partially because we weren't following it at some points. And how is that advantageous or disadvantageous? One of them, as we move forward and we talk about unintended consequences of wider streets. I'm not going to bring up a name, but there was a applicant that had 4 felonies and should be, this is the first time we did that background check. Should that have happened? We had it happening. It was happening. So even if they're seasonal and they come back the next year, as we know, whether it be a drug problem, whether it be whatever, it can come and go for one thing. Number 2, you're not guaranteed to hire the same employees back. So do we have due diligence to protect the public in our parks by our employees that are hired? Absolutely. I mean, to that degree, you're talking about whether it's cost benefits or whatever, or if it's a minor infraction. Yeah, those things can be waived through. Your HR can figure those out too. But we have that diligence to actually protect our public. You know, we have people that put in pickleball courts and they want to make sure that their cars are safe when they're there. We have people that are going to want a splash pad, and if that ends up in that same park, they're going to want to know their kids are safe there.
The other thing too is a current employee, if you are found to be under the influence and sent out for a drug test, there are consequences that could include termination. So with new hires coming on, we want to hold them to that same standard as our current employees. And for, as the mayor said, it's safety of our public. They have access to children just as all of the other employees do as well.
Carrie?
Yeah, I just want to say that even though they are city employees, working at the county, we do background checks and drug screening for volunteers too. It's a liability to the city to have somebody working with vulnerable adults and children that have the capacity of being criminals or preying on those vulnerable adults and children. So it's worth following that policy. It's there for a reason, and our liability is really what it comes down to.
Wendy?
I just wanted to add that I found it very interesting. The Tuesday or Wednesday after our prior meeting, I was reviewing the information that was available on the American Rescue Plan and the fiscal recovery funds. One of the stipulations in the agreement to accept the fiscal recovery funds is we are required to have a government-wide drug-free workplace. And we will be getting just slightly under $800,000 from this program. So the federal government also upholds that we should have a drug-free workplace. I thought it was interesting timing.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that point, but that's the other part too, is accepting monies from places that demand a drug-free zone.
Okay, and I appreciate everything that you guys have said, and I'm glad that we got that out there so that everybody understands why we're doing it, that it's not that we're picking on the museum, that it's just a matter of keeping consistency across the board. Thank you very much.
And thank you, David.
Yeah, Eileen sort of just said what I was about to say, but I appreciate having it brought forth to the council. Thought we could discuss it because it seemed to be something that wasn't being discussed. And if it's out there as a discussion amongst the public, we should at least hear a broader explanation. And I do appreciate that broader explanation quite a bit. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, moving on, I believe. Daniel, Eileen Daniel. Okay, thank you. Moving on, I just had to say your name right a few more times, so I hopefully remember. Discuss and approve professional service agreement with the Hydro Corp for commercial and cross-contamination control
Barnett, I'll make a motion to approve professional service agreement with HydroCore for commercial cross-connection control services.
Holt, second.
Larson, second.
There's a motion and a second. This is, I believe it's a contract, right?
Yep.
So we're spending money. That being the case, we started this in 2017 and that protects our waterways, so money well spent. Call roll, please.
Gerald Anderson,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett,
Aye.
David Holt,
Aye.
Andrew Larson.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss and approve bills and claims in the amount of $985,290.29. Page 61 in your packet for the brief description. We handed the detailed ones around.
Barnett, I'll make a motion to approve bills and claims in the amount of $985,209.29.
Holt, I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? And Eileen Daniel has her hands up. Okay.
Chris, I just want to say that I've been on this council for 13 plus years, and this is the first time I can remember where it's been below $1 million.
We have fiscally sound policy coming out of this administration that it's been like, no. Now watch Wendy blush because she knows that's not necessarily the truth. Eileen?
It was brought to my attention in looking at the detail of the bills and claims that in the building of the bathrooms, I believe, at Pioneer Park, a great deal of money was spent at a certain hardware store that we may have a contentious past relationship with. And it was brought up that perhaps we would look at using a more local company rather than one that starts with an M.
I got you.
Okay. My question is, and maybe this is for Jeremy, is how the decision is made as to where they're going to purchase supplies from.
Jeremy, please come up to the mic. It's red already, so you don't need to hit it.
We just kind of go with wherever we can get supplies from at the time, whether it's Ace Hardware or Menards.
Okay.
And that's our options in Rhinelander.
Or Home Depot or Triggs Ace. So when you're going and putting together your list, do you do a cost comparison of the different stores, or is it just you just kind of decide, we're close to Menards, so we'll head over there?
No, Menards is furthest away, but they're the cheapest, so.
Okay.
And then we usually receive the 11% discount on top of that. So when we're buying big ticket items, such as like the Parks Garage, we just got a few $1,000 rebate back on that. So just basically free money going into that building again. So.
Okay. It was brought up by a constituent, and I thought I would bring it up to ask.
And because this kind of fits in the discussion process, I'm going to also, I didn't put it in the mayor's comments, but highlight the fact that the timber price has dropped 40% from its all-time high low of 170%. But at the same time, timber's coming down. So that's a good news thing. Thank you. Please call roll.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
David Holt,
Aye.
Andrew Larson,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson,
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett.
Aye.
Ayes have it, the motion carries. We'll pay the bills. Discuss and approve the picnic license of a temporary expansion of alcohol beverage licensing under 4.0501 on King Street between Brown and Stevens Street on Saturday, August 7th.
Barnett, I'll make a motion to approve the picnic license and temporary expansion of alcohol beverage licenses under 4.05.01 on King Street between Brown and Stevens Street on Saturday, August 7th, 2021 for Art Store 10-year anniversary reunion celebration.
Second.
Who was the second?
Holt.
Holt, second. All right, further discussion. Gerald?
What does temporary expansion mean?
It is a redundancy because temporary means for a short period of time. Extension would mean to allow them to do it. So a temporary extension would be to allow them to do it for a temporary period of time. It's probably a bad use of the English language, but what it means is that you're extending them the right to have a license for a temporary period of time.
Poor use, not bad.
And that's to Art Start?
Yes, that's to Art Start, yes.
You can click on your mic and say it out loud if you really want to say it.
Should it be extension instead of expansion? Okay, so it's just got the wrong word in there.
Correct.
Awesome.
I believe that it's expanding the area in which you can have alcohol, right? No, it's not? Okay, never mind that.
All right,
Let's just be what it is. The motion is that to allow them to have a temporary license in the area that's defined. That's the motion that you're voting on. And we'll have an English lesson next month.
Thank you. Led by Gerald. Amen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries.
This is what happens when you don't get a motion. You don't get done in 2 hours.
People get a little goofy. Discussion approval of resolution 20-16 for the establishment of the shared ride taxi fare. This is page 63.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2021-16 to the establishment of shared ride taxi agency fare for the discussion.
Anderson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion.
Can
Tom?
this be elaborated on? Like what exactly?
Yeah, great question. So obviously we contract with Running for our cab service, and it's customary for municipalities to have an agency fare. Essentially, those like agents, I guess I would call them fiscal agents for individuals. Basically, they get a sum of money to purchase their transportation costs, and so basically we're rolling in an agency fare. It's also meant to encourage really kind of intentional use of other alternative transportation. So and it also will help financially offset our local cost share that we would occasionally be saddled with if the transit did not generate enough sufficient income. So at this point, we're recommending the agency fare, and it's customary that you would have an agency fare. And it looks like Wendy may have something else to add.
It's for like agencies like Inclusa that I don't want to use the word customer, but the people that they serve, they're getting funding from another source. It's not going to be coming out of the customer's individual pocket. It's kind of like using 2 government programs to issue something. So it's very common in other communities to have an agency fare that they charge just like Inclusa. So they buy like a set of, I don't know if it's really like a punch card type of system, and then they distribute it, but it doesn't affect the pocket of our shared ride riders.
Very well explained, Wendy. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have a motion carries. Discuss and approve resolution 2021-17 special assessment charges to be incurred that were incurred on the raising of 21 North Oneida Avenue, and this is where those charges can be applied to their tax. So it's pretty much the housekeeping.
Daniel, make a motion to approve resolution 2021-17, special assessment for charges incurred from the raising of 21 North Oneida Avenue.
Holt, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Discussion and approve resolution 2021-18, the special assessment of the charge that occurred from the raising of 521 Gardner Street property. And first side note, we took out a whole container full of garbage from inside that before it was tore down.
Yeah. Daniel, make a motion to approve resolution 2021-18, special assessment of charges incurred from raising of 521 Gardner Street.
Mikulowski, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Discussion approved Monaco Street pay request in the amount of $87,250.28. This is page 68 in your packet.
Barnett, I make a motion to approve the Monaco Street pay request in the amount of $87,250.28.
Holt, second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Any questions for Mark? Please call roll.
David Holt,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Andrew Larson.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss and approve the Stevens Street pay request number 16 in the amount of $399,676.22. This is page 70 in your packet.
Holt, I will make a motion to approve the Stevens Street pay request number 16 in the amount of $399,676.22.
Barnett, second.
Here's a motion and a second. Eileen.
I just want to make sure this does not include the snowmobile crossing.
Mark.
It does not.
Correct. Any other questions? Gerald?
How close are we to finishing the Stevens Street project?
Mark?
I don't have a number for it, Gerald, but we're very close. So this pay request goes through June 4th, which was last Friday. That's all the asphalt paving, less what they did on Saturday, which is about $40,000 worth of paving. The striping is not on this pay request. Final striping, that's about $24,000. And then there's some additional items that need to be paid, but we're very close to be finishing up. So the next pay request is going to be finalizing those items and getting settled on some quantities with the contractors.
Cool. Projections on where it comes in on budget?
You know, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Sorry.
We're over the budget for the project, but as we discussed moving forward with it, all of the additional items, less the Lincoln Street portion, which is $200,000, that was all city share. Everything falls within the contingency of the funding agencies, so you're maximizing all the grant and loan funding available for the project.
Thank you. Tom?
I was going to do this tomorrow, but since I have you standing right here, can you guys get the big sign that's in my driveway out of there? It's laying on the ground. It's been there for like weeks. And weeks.
I thought you said you wanted that.
Nope.
Yeah, we'll get rid
Thank
of
you.
Go ahead and call roll on this.
Andrew Larson,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson,
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
David Holt.
Aye.
Motion carries. Discuss and approve the change order number 15 to include the work change directive 36-40 for a total amount of $12,019.05. This is page 90 in your packet.
Barnett, I will make a motion to approve change order number 15, which includes work change directives 36-40 for a total amount of $12,019.05.
Holt, I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
David Holt,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson,
Aye.
Andrew Larson,
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss and approve the purchase agreement with POMSL? Yeah.
Palmasol.
All right, sorry.
Or Pomazol, I guess, however you want to pronounce it.
Equipment, fire equipment for the purchase of a new ambulance not to exceed $248,336.
Daniel, make a motion to approve the purchase agreement with Palmasol Fire Equipment Incorporated for the purchase of a new ambulance not to exceed $248,336.
Barnett.
Second.
Who seconded? I'm sorry.
Barnett.
No, Holt had it. He finished it.
All right. So this item was a solicitation that Tom Wadick and I pulled together right before he left, or before he retired, I guess, from the city. Josh and I met last week to review the proposal and the bid. It was a single bid that we received. We did not receive other bids. We find it acceptable. I think Josh can speak to kind of the nature of it. I think it's an exciting opportunity to add a new ambulance to our fleet. It's the first ambulance we've had in since the launch of the EMS service here in the city. So as we pick up transfers and some additional capacity, having this in our fleet lineup will be much appreciated. Hopefully not spending any time in the mechanic shop. So go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, our current fleet, we have 3 2009 ambulances. This one will be replacing one with 94,000 miles on it with a failing transmission, failing fuel injectors, failing air conditioning. It used to be our frontline ambulance, but it's back up to the backup right now. It's just not safe to use. The one from Palmasol Fire Equipment, they got new about a month ago for a demo to show other fire departments. The current wait period is over a year for a new ambulance. This one will suit our needs. It's a nice ambulance, and it's a really fair price from what we're finding from other fire departments that are getting bids.
The fire department, as far as your coworkers, got to play in this ambulance.
Yep.
Obviously, it was also parked outside here. Although I missed that memo, as far as us being able to see it, I don't know where the heck.
I don't think it
went.
ever actually made it to the council meeting. It was at the fire
thank
station.
goodness.
No, yeah.
I thought I went nuts. But go ahead and give us a rundown of what your coworkers believe in this vehicle.
It's a great ambulance. It's way better than what we have. It's got better suspension. It's got liquid suspension compared to the air, which we have all kinds of issues in the winter with the airlines freezing. If you ever see our ambulances in the winter, when they're leaned to one side or they're squatting really low in the back, and our air lanes are froze. And everybody's aware of our road conditions. Bouncing down the road with an ambulance without any suspension, with somebody with back issues or any issues at all, it's horrible. So a lot of those problems should be taken care of with this one. We still need a need for ambulances in the future, so hopefully we can get something done before, like, we can't wait another 12 years. And if we wait much longer, we'll be able to put collector plates on ambulances. And I don't think we want to be known for that.
No.
And then just a fiscal note, obviously we approved the financing plan earlier tonight. We're going to be spending down basically our reserves to cover the purchase of the ambulance. So just to understand kind of what our plan is with that, unless Wendy's shaking her head no, but that's my understanding.
Go ahead and stand up to the mic so it's
because
on
we
record.
haven't, and we also have not. Maybe make a note on what the financing situation is on the existing ambulances, because it's my understanding we still have some notes outstanding on activities associated with that.
The interesting thing about the ambulances are the principal and interest on the funding for the ambulances are paid out of the ambulance fund. So it's not included in the $1 million every other year borrowing. So it won't be using any of the 2018 leftover borrowing. It'll be a new issue paid back specifically from the ambulance fund, from their revenues.
Yeah, not from the general fund tax levy, I guess is the point. I mean, it all gets lumped together in the mill
but
rate.
it's kind of a circle, because the ambulance fund is subsidized by the general fund, but technically it's paid by the ambulance fund.
Thank you. Go ahead and call roll.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
David Holt,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson,
Aye.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Andrew Larson,
Aye.
Thomas Barnett.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Motion carries. Discuss and approve the conditional mobile home license to MHP Mobile Home Parks.
As it indicated in my email on Friday, it's not normal for these to come through the governing body unless it's in a new application for a mobile home park. This is an interesting situation where they've made pretty decent headway on their arrears. However, with the existing moratorium on evictions, there's really no incentive for people to be current with their obligations. So Steve and I talked about this, and so an appropriate motion would be conditional approval and grant them a 3-month extension for meeting their obligations. And obviously, if they don't, then we're coming back to this group for another discussion.
Barnett, I will make a motion to approve a conditional mobile home license to MHP Mobile Home Parks.
For 3 months.
For 3 months.
Holt.
Gerald, second to that. Gerald Anderson. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss developing public art policy and regulation.
So at this point, this is an FYI for all of you. Alderperson Barnett's actually on the kind of committee, I guess we'll call it, the task force maybe, if you will, on the creation of public art policy and regulations. It's our tentative plan to bring some specifics to the council in 2 weeks at the next meeting. So they're in very preliminary draft phase at this point, and I'll go to Ald Barnett if he has anything to add. But at this point, would take any input or any feedback folks have on delineating what the city's responsibility and role will be in the discussion about creating public art policy and regulations.
I just think this is an exciting, progressive, forward-moving initiative. Public arts is a way to beautify our downtown, a way to engage the public, and also a way to get people to want to visit Rhinelander even more. It's been proven in towns that have a public art policy that it does nothing but improve the city in ways that art can only do. So I would highly encourage everybody here to learn all they can about what this commission is trying to do, and or committee, or whatever Zach wanted to call it, is trying to do, and get behind it, because I think it's a great thing for this community.
I think our hidden gems here in the North Woods are not necessarily even downtown, but anywhere that art can be put. But then also our trees, when we look at our tree board president out there and whatever, it's an interesting place where we can make strides, and we're willing to make those strides at this point. Tom?
Does he not have a better title than that?
City Forester.
Yes.
I just call him the guru, the guru of plants and smiles. Any other further discussion? All right, we're moving on then. Look forward to those coming out. Monthly reports from our departments, and even before this, we will be having our 6-month goal workshop soon. They're all aware, and they're actually during their one-on-ones discussing those goals with Zach. I think from the last department meeting, it was addressed that those should be right to the forefront. So look for that work session coming up. Is there any additions to any of the reports that anybody would like to give? Oh, crap. Well, I mean, Steve.
You haven't paid off in the last bet, so don't worry about it. Yeah, you'll notice there wasn't a legal report. That's because... You will notice there wasn't a legal report because I was working too hard. No, the three things. One is, I didn't want to give it that way. I want to do it orally because Just some very quick things. I've been working obviously on the DNR matters. We've got several of those going on right now. The DNR is back in business. They kind of took off a lot of time during the COVID, and now they're coming back. And so we're having some of those water quality issues from the DNR's perspective raising their head. And so the county and myself, County Corporation Council, myself, and the airport attorney have been working on some of those issues. We've also been looking at some of the issues, as Gerald pointed out, looking at code enforcement and also review of the zoning code to try to bring those two together. The new office relationship with the new employee for code enforcement, you're going to see a pickup in code enforcement. So it's really important that if you do know of areas that you'd like to see us working on code enforcement, that you get that to me. We've already identified 2 or 3 areas that we're going to have to be looking at that. I did also want you to know that, and these are following up on last time's meeting, or I think it was really the Planning Commission meeting that I attended by Zoom, the Riverstone PUD project. I've been on the phone with the in parties that are involved with that project, and we've worked it out. So some of the consternation you may have heard about that and how it was supposed to work, and there was lots of misunderstandings on what a PUD is, what a condominium, what a twin-dominium is, and I think we've resolved all that. I do want you as council members to recognize that the whole world of zoning is very difficult when we allow things to occur, which you have in the past, that do not follow the zoning code. And here's a typical project. That PUD project is going to be a nightmare for years to come because of the way it was laid out, because there's not public streets, and therefore it makes it very, very difficult. We have another situation where we have a person that bought a lot that really isn't being serviced by a public street, and she suddenly wants to use the easement. Well, the easement really isn't on the property that she thought it was on. We have a road that's been servicing the property, but it's not a city road, so it's not the city's problem. We also have a situation where somebody built on a city street that's been dedicated. Those are the things that I've been working on that you don't always hear about. That, in fact, I don't want to write all that detail out in those forms. The biggest thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, though, is my major project of the last several days has been working on the pickleball agreement. And I told you at the last meeting that I would follow up on that, and I would note that the people that are interested in pickleball who have communicated with me have brought a lot of things out into the open, which is good. Number one, the pickleball group is just people. There's no real pickleball group. And because of that, we can't make a contract. I can't contract with something that doesn't exist. So I want you to understand, and I think the pickleball group understands, that they're making a donation as individuals to the city of Rhinelander of these beautiful mesh surfaces. I did independent research, and the opacity level that used to exist was 70, but nobody makes that anymore because nobody wants it. So the opacity level we're looking at is a 75. That's the lowest opacity level that's readily available. And you could probably hand make or hire somebody to make one less than that. These are examples of opacity levels about 80 or 85 from the examples that I've seen. So if you want to look at that. So that's really where that's at. So what the group is, and what I've indicated to the group, is that what they need to do is they need to find the organization that they're going to buy this from. This happens to be Airflow Inc., Tuffy Windstrings, which is one of the groups I looked at, so that we can know how soon we're going to have the product, what it's going to take to install the product. Because the other thing is, because they're not a group, we really as a city have to install the screens. We can't have them installing the screens. They'd all have to take tests. They'd have to be screened, yes. But the bottom line is that we'll have to, now, that doesn't mean they can't come along and help, and that means they can't provide some, assistance, but we just gotta be careful how we do that. So the installation, maintenance, and removal, as well as the insurance of the product, is gonna be a city responsibility. It's not free to us, because we're gonna have to use city staff and time, and I want you to know that. Now, we could probably have, this is what I'm hoping for, is the group that they're buying it from, if that group will professionally install it, they'll have their own insurance, they'll have their own installers, so I'm really hoping that the group that they're buying this material from is going to have professional installers that can come up to Rhinelander and install it, and we can learn, I look back to Jeremy, we can learn how they install it so that when it comes time to take it down, we'll know how to do that. So I want you to know that we've been working back and forth. We've exchanged lots of information about the whole process, and I think that's exactly where we are right now. And really, that's why I wanted to give an oral report, so that if anybody had any questions on what's going to be this memorandum of understanding. Oh, the other big thing is, that a lot of people ask this, and I've got it in writing on several occasions, and now it'll be public, is that you need to realize that they do not want anything else. They have no other plans beyond putting up the screening. The other thing that I've asked them, so that you know that, I've asked them if they're willing to have someone volunteer to do lessons or to do programming, because if we're going to have pickleball courts and the pickleball courts are going to belong to the city, it's probably important that we put it in as part of our rec program, which means we should teach people how to play the game as part of the rec program. And I haven't heard back from them, but I'm sure I'll hear a cooperative yes back from them. So now I'm able to answer any questions you have.
Eileen?
Once they're taken down, do we have a place to store them? Because I'm guessing that's a pretty bulky item.
Jeremy?
Well, just a minute before you go on. They've offered to store them or provide us for a facility for us to store them. They offered that. Now, whether that's going to come to fruition, we'll see. I just want you to know that. But Jeremy, yes, go ahead.
He's not here?
He's here.
All right.
Yeah, not at this time, we don't, but if we need to find a place, then we dig around, I guess, and hope the mice and squirrels don't eat it.
That's my concern, is that they're going to be...
We might have to ask Carrie if he negotiated that spot.
Yeah.
The historical museum.
Well, even then...
Tom?
Do we have an estimate of what this is going to cost us?
No, because we don't know if the company's going to install them.
Oh, I see what
You know,
okay.
in other words, we're still in the process. I'm not negotiating a contract, because I can't negotiate a contract
Right.
with an organization that doesn't exist. But I certainly can work with the individuals, and I get the impression from the individuals, they're more than willing to take all the steps that they can possibly take to facilitate getting this done as quickly and as rapidly and as effectively, which I think will mean that they will go to the company that sells these products and say, will you come on and install them? Because if they have to wait till we install them, it could be just after the snow melts, I mean, so that's the other reality. And I will point out that I will take to them up on their offer to store them, because if they're destroyed, I mean, they're the ones that are going to get hurt the most, because they're the ones that want it the most. And so we're working on all these things. I just want you all to know that they've been very cooperative and very responsive. There's been not this, seeming animosity that the large group impression gave. So we're working on it and we're moving forward.
Go ahead, Dave.
Can I make a comment on this? I'm very wary of negotiating with a group that's not really a group that has a singular defined voice, and making agreements with a dispersed group, right? Because there's not a singular statement of intent. I worry about handshake deals intentions, the best of intentions moving forward. I just wanted to voice that concern there. I understand that you're working very hard at coming up with a memorandum of understanding. But that's just a concern I have that.
But I want you to understand, just as we did in the first project, I had the people that were doing the actual construction come here, show me the contract, show me how they were getting paid. So, I mean, that's the same thing I'll do here, is I'll make sure that this is all paid for, that the company has, before we do anything. Likewise, if there's an individual in the group that has storage facilities in the community, we'll have a contract with them to store the stuff. It'll be in writing, but it'll be with an individual. It won't be with a non-existent group.
Just so you're aware, even in the communications, they have identified a singular person to speak for, and it's Dr. Michael Henry. So if things go awry, that they've identified him as their
spokesman.
Their spokesman. So it's just so that's on record. That's where that sits. But yeah, you're correct to alleviate that. All right. So
I'm done. That's it.
I'll take it.
You have other questions?
I will make a motion to accept the reports from boards and commissions, from departments, excuse me, as presented.
Mikulowski, second.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The monthly reports will be in the record as stated and orally given. Thank you. Closed session, if necessary, convene into closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.85. I'm sorry, 1A, deliberating concerning a case in which was the subject of any judicial or quasi-judicial trial or hearing before the governing body. This discussion involves personal matters in regard to the approval of or denial of an operator's license.
Daniel, make a motion to go into closed session.
Mikulowski, second.
Call roll. No.
Yes.
Call roll.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Andrew Larson,
I'll abstain.
Yeah, because he won't be allowed in closed session from there anyway.
David Holt,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing,
And I'll abstain as well.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson, Tom Barnett,
Aye.
Eileen Daniel.
Aye.
Ayes have it. We will enter into closed session after a 2-minute break. It's 9:03 PM, and I'll accept a motion.
Danielle, make a motion to overturn the decision by Chief Gautier to,
Motion to approve the granting of the license. I know. You're not overturning, you're making a decision to grant the license.
okay, I'd like to make a motion to grant Mr. Brown his operator's license.
No, press the button. Now say it. Functioning after night. Anybody else want to?
Holt, second.
Thank you. Holt made the second. We have a motion and a second to approve the license. Yes. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on real quick, future agenda items as listed. Please contact your clerk or your administrator or myself if you have other items for that agenda. And at this point, we are at the end of the thing, so we are adjourned.